This is the Tree of Life, Season 17, Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be talking about the compression of context exclusion into digital exclusion, as a special case in the focusing of the attention on some object. To start out, we talked about how when parallel structures form contemporaneous strings of analog and digital structures, reflecting context interlinking, it produces what is called context exclusion. In this episode, I would like to give an example of context exclusion and digital exclusion, and show how compression occurs through the conversion of context exclusion to digital exclusion. Imagine we are talking about three people seated at a table with four balls numbered 1 through 4. Imagine that person A affirms the taking of one ball, numbered 1 through 4, for person B, and another for person C. Now, context exclusion is the result of analog structures, as between impulses, which are substitutionary. If we imagine that persons B and C cannot take the same ball and impulses must be paired exclusively. Then in this example, for person B, taking ball 1 is impulse 1, which is affirmed by person A. And taking ball 2 represents impulse 2, which is negated. And for person C, taking ball 3 represents impulse 1, which is affirmed, then only taking ball 4 can be negated. Digital exclusion arising out of a digital structure, on the other hand, in the same example, would mean that impulse 1 is taking ball 1 by person B, where impulse 2 is taking any ball but 1. In this case, the negational impulse corresponding to person B must coincide with the affirmational impulse of person C. Now, affirmational valence means that whereas within the analog structure impulse 1 to take ball 1 is affirmed, impulse 2 to take ball 2 is negated. In the digital counterpart, impulse 1 is likewise affirmed. In a negational valence, impulse 2 within the digital structure is any ball but 1, which is affirmed, meaning that impulse 2 corresponding to ball 2 is affirmed in the parallel analog structure. From this we can see that in the negational valence, the impulses corresponding to balls 3 and 4 are also affirmed by the digital structure, although not present within the analog counterpart. Thus, we see that negational valence is broader than the impulse corresponding to affirmation in the analog structure. This means that negational valence actually produces additional analog structures, equal to the set -2. Thus, it is possible to see how a negational valence as between parallel digital and analog structures contributes to a surplus of analog structures relative to some self-conscious subject. Negational valence magnifies the ratio of digital to analog structures by enabling the simultaneous affirmation of parallel impulses. Thus, it is easy to see that pairing of analog and digital structures by affirmation or negation is the bottleneck in the flow between digital and analog structures. Likewise, these simultaneous parallel analog structures must possess negational impulses, which are certain to conflict with each other. This contradiction displaces affirmation of a particular impulse upon some self-conscious subject as a field of exclusion, since analog structures are contextual and substitutionary. That's the end of the podcast for today.